Alright, what's going on guys? In this video I'm going to teach you how to upgrade the Tezzeret Master of Metal Planeswalker deck. Now, a bit of a disclaimer here. If you want the best deck possible in Standard, maybe don't start with a Planeswalker deck. Check the latest tournament results. You will find very good decks there. They will also be very expensive. In this video, we are going to be taking the Tezzeret Master of Metal Planeswalker deck, and we're just going to be upgrading it. We're going to stick to this deck's themes. We're going to go card by card, and we're just going to try to make it a little bit more powerful, a little bit faster, a little bit more consistent, and we're going to do it on a budget. We're going to try to not exceed the original deck's MSRP. So if you bought this deck and maybe you're not that into it, and you're thinking about buying another bad Planeswalker deck, for that same price, we can upgrade this and actually make it playable. So let's do that instead. So, how does this deck work? Well, the deck uses Improvise. We can see it on cards like Windkin Raiders, Fin Hauler, and Barricade Breaker. These cards have a very high mana cost for their size, but they have Improvise. So if we have 2 or 3 artifacts in play, we can tap those artifacts, help pay for the mana cost of these cards, and get them out much quicker. Take Barricade Breaker for example. It's a 7 mana 7/5. But if we have, let's say, 3 artifacts in play, suddenly it's a 4 mana 7/5, which is a whole lot better. That's the general idea of this deck. We want to flood the board with a bunch of small, cheap artifacts, and then tap them so we can get these really big creatures out really fast. It's basically a mana ramp deck, except we're not actually ramping our mana. We're just playing a bunch of artifacts and then using those as mana. Speaking of cheap artifacts, that's the other theme of this deck. We have things like Ornithopter, Merchant Stockhand, and Augmenting Automaton. So the idea here is, again, these are basically just like Elvish Mystics or Llanowar Elves. The artifacts that we're going to play for cheap and use them as mana. Ornithopter, for example, it might seem weird, like, why would you want to play a 0 mana 0/2 with flying? It can't do anything. But just imagine if that was a land that said, you can play this as a second land per turn. That would be kind of crazy. You could play a third land. You could play 2 lands on turn 1. You know, it would basically let you play an extra land per turn. And that's kind of what Ornithopter does, because it's free. You just slap it on the battlefield. Don't have to pay anything. And then you can use that for mana to play improvised creatures. So that's basically what it is. It's basically like a land or a mana elf. But there's actually a really cool trick with this card. Unfortunately, this deck doesn't really utilize it well, but I think it's really cool, so I want to show this because I do want to focus on this in my build. You only get 2 of these, but there's a card called Tezzeret's Touch, and it's really cool with Ornithopter. Tezzeret's Touch is an enchantment. It costs 3 mana, and you enchant an artifact, and that artifact becomes a 5/5 creature. So, you can put this on a non-creature artifact and get a 5/5 out of it, but if we put it on Ornithopter, Tezzeret's Touch does not say that it loses its abilities. So on Ornithopter, Tezzeret's Touch makes it a 5/5 flyer that's swinging on turn 3. That's really cool. I really like that. And the cool thing about Tezzeret's Touch as well is that if the creature dies, you get it right back. So there's no loss in card advantage there, so that's kind of cool too. So I do want to kind of focus on this. I'm going to be playing 4 Tezzeret's Touch and 4 Ornithopters. We'll get to the deck tech here in a second, but that's something that I want to focus on because the idea behind this deck is to get really big creatures in really quick. And a 3rd turn 5/5 flyer that's swinging, that's basically what we want to do. So yeah, Tezzeret's Touch is fantastic. We're going to have a little bit of a sub-theme of that going on in this deck. So that's how the deck works. So let's look at my improvements. First off, we're going to take out a Foundry Assembler and a Dakara P-Foul for 2 Bastion Inventors. So Foundry Assembler just doesn't do a whole lot. I mean, it's a 5 mana 3/3 with Improvise. Our best case scenario is that we have a 3rd turn 3/3. We're basically never going to have a turn 2 3/3. It's almost always going to be turn 3, and that's just not that great, so I'm not a big fan of that one. Dakar P-Foul also just doesn't do what we want to do. I mean, this has no purpose in this deck. It's a 4 mana 2/4, which is already bad. We have to pay 1 to give it flying. It's just bad. It also costs too much. It's just not what we're doing. Next up, I am personally going to be taking out 2 Windkin Raiders and 1 Fin Hauler for 3 Barricade Breakers. Some people might like the flying with Windkin Raiders, but it just doesn't have a ton of power. Fin Hauler is cool too, but I don't know, I don't really see it as being that great. Barricade Breaker is really cool just because we can get this out very consistently on turn 4 or so, and it smashes face really quickly, though I will note that we have a better option for this. It just doesn't quite fit our budget, but Herald of Anguish would be really good in this slot. It's a little bit too big for our budget. So we're not going to be playing that, but Barricade Breaker should be cool. It does a lot of damage, and it should be coming out fairly quickly in most games. Next up, I'm going to be taking out 2 Implement of Examination for 2 Tezzeret's Touch, because as I mentioned, I really like this. We're looking to go super aggressive, and Tezzeret's Touch just does a fantastic job of it. Implement of Examination is, it's okay. I mean, we get 2 cards out of it for 4 mana, but you could just play a Glimmer of Genius and, get the same amount of cards. It's just not super exciting. Tezzeret's Touch, it's gonna wreck face. It's gonna deal a lot of damage in a lot of games. It's just really good, so we're gonna go with that, no question here. So next up, I'm gonna be taking out 3 Tezzeret's Simulacrums for 3 Ornithopters. So these Simulacrums are actually really, really good if we have Tezzeret in play. The fact that they could just tap and make our opponent lose 3 life, that's actually extremely powerful. The problem is, without Tezzeret, they're really weak. It's a 3 mana 2/3, which is not great. It can tap to make an opponent lose 1, which is fine, but it's nothing exciting. If we can consistently have Tezzerets in play, these can actually be pretty cool. I mean, these can end the game really quickly, but we're not going to have Tezzeret in play that much. We only have 1 of him, and if he dies, then these just become dead cards, basically. So we're going to play 4 Ornithopters, just for those Tezzeret's Touch, because a 3 mana 5/5 with flying is just something that I want. And again, this is something that we're going to use to cast Improvised Creatures. So if we don't have Tezzeret's Touch, that's fine. I mean, this is basically an Elvish Mystic, the 0 mana Elvish Mystic. We could have 4 Elvish Mystics out on turn 1, potentially. Not likely, but it is technically possible, sort of. Anyway, it's going to work really well in this deck. I like it. It's just going to help us get huge creatures out as quickly as possible, which is what we want to do in this deck. Next up, I'm going to be taking out 2 Augmenting Automatons for 2 Hope of Girapers. So the idea behind this is that the Automatons are just kind of it's a 1 mana 1/1. The Hope of Giraper is also a 1 mana 1/1, though it has flying, but the benefit of the Automaton is that it can pump itself. The problem is we really just want to go super, super fast with this deck. This is more of a mid-range strategy. We want to play the Automaton, we want to amass a ton of mana, and then we want to, assemble a big creature, basically. But we're going to be doing that with Tezzeret's Touch anyway, and it's also it's kind of clunky. I mean, we can pay 6 mana to make it a 4/4, but we have to pay that 6 mana every single turn. It's just not that exciting. Hope of Giraper, though, I mean, it's a 1 mana 1/1 with flying. We can harass our opponent with it in the early game. It's a mana rock, it's a 1 mana 1/1 that we're going to tap for Improvise. And if we get a Tezzeret's Touch, it's another creature that we can throw it on to make a 5/5 flying on turn 3. It's certainly going to work a lot better than Augmenting Automaton. Next up, we're going to be taking out the Ironclad Revolutionary for another one of these Hope of Girapers. So the Revolutionary is just not super exciting. If we do sacrifice an artifact, essentially it's a 6 mana 6/6 that makes our opponent lose 2 life. That by itself wouldn't be that great, and we have to lose an artifact to get there. So it's just not that great. Hope of Giraper is just going to make the deck more consistent. It's going to get our improvised creatures out faster, which the Revolutionary can't do. And, it has the potential to be a 5/5 with flying, potentially. So yeah, it's just going to be a lot more effective in this slot than the Revolutionary. Next up, I'm going to be taking out 2 Dund Operatives for 2 Scrap Heap Scroungers. Yeah, if you follow my channel, I really, really like Scrap Heap Scrounger, and I tend to put it in pretty much every deck ever. But it's really, really good, and it's, if we compare these side by side, they're somewhat similar. So the Dund Operative is a 2 mana 2/2, but it can become a 3/2 if we have an artifact, which we almost always will. So it's basically a 2 mana 3/2 with Death Touch. On the other hand, Scrap Heap Scrounger is a 2 mana 3/2 that can't block, so it seems worse, but the ability to constantly come back over and over again is just super useful. I can't stress how useful that is, especially against control decks. They have to kill it over and over and over again, and it just keeps coming back. It's a great way to just generate card advantage. Your opponent's going to just waste cards over and over and over again. It's just super good. I really like it. It's also an artifact, so we can tap it for Improvise. So yeah, I would much prefer to have Scrap Heap Scrounger over Dund Operative. Obviously, the Death Touch is kind of nice, but, it's not an artifact. We can't tap it for Improvise, so it's just making our deck too clunky. There's how many times are you going to have a Dund Operative in hand and say, man, I wish this was an artifact because then I could get a Barricade Breaker out. Well, with Scrap Heap Scrounger, you can. Alternatively, you can just, swing with it every turn, no fear, because if it dies, that's fine. We'll bring it right back, not a big deal. And continuing with Scrap Heap Scrounger, we're going to be taking out Quicksmith Spy and Treasure Keeper, and we're going to be replacing those with 2 more Scrap Heap Scroungers. So Quicksmith Spy is kind of cool. We make an artifact, be able to tap to draw a card every turn. The problem is, first off, it costs 4. We're looking to go really, really fast with this deck. We really want to be aggressive. We want to get stuff out fast. We want big stuff to come in really quick and overwhelm our opponent. Quicksmith Spy doesn't do that. It draws cards, which is really, really good. You usually want to draw cards, but we are looking to be aggressive with this. I do think it's a pretty decent card. It's just not something that we want to do in this deck specifically. Treasure Keeper also has a really cool effect when it dies. We can reveal stuff off the top of our library until we hit an artifact and then play that for free. So it's kind of a cool effect, but still, Scrapheap Scrounger is just more consistent. I'm not saying Quicksmith Spy and Treasure Keeper are bad, they're just not as good as Scrapheap Scrounger in this deck specifically. So moving on, I'm going to be taking out 4 Pendulum of Patterns for 4 Prophetic Prisms. So the idea behind Pendulum of Patterns is that, first off, it's a 2-mana artifact that we gain 3 life when it comes into play. So ideally, we have a 2-mana artifact that we can use for Improvise, and then in the late game, once we get to the point where we have plenty of mana for our improvised creatures and we don't need to tap our artifacts, we can crack it for a card. Alternatively, we can just play Prophetic Prism and just get that card, right? We just get it right away. We don't have to wait until the late game to crack it. We play Prophetic Prism, we get that card, and then we have the Prophetic Prism to tap for Improvise. That seems better to me. Obviously, we don't get the 3 life, but we're looking to be aggressive here again. We just want to kill our opponent super quick. The 3 life is negligible. I would rather just have that card. Having that card allowing us to dig is just going to get us to, more creatures that we can play and overwhelm our opponent. I don't want to, be waiting for the late game to play a Pendulum of Patterns and then, get the card after turn 5, 6, 7, or whatever. It also can color fix for us if we need that. So that's not bad. Moving on, I'm actually going to be taking out some basic lands. I want to take out 1 island and 1 swamp for 2 Metal Spinners Puzzle Knot. This deck just has way too many lands. I think it has 25 to start with. It's too much. You don't need that many lands, especially in this deck. This is a deck that's looking to put creatures out super quick. It also has Improvise, so you're reducing the cost of stuff. So you just don't need 25 lands. We're going to be flooded time and time again. We're going to go down to 23, and Metal Spinners Puzzle Knot is just going to work a lot better. Because we can draw a card, so if we are mana screwed, at least we're going to be drawing into potentially more lands. And it's also nice that we can crack it, get another card if we need to. Obviously, we lose 2 life in doing so, but it's usually worth it. That's fine. 1 card for 1 life, not a bad exchange at all. I'm also going to be taking out 2 Universal Solvents for 2 Underhanded Designs. So Underhanded Designs, it says that every single time we play an artifact, we can pay 1 to make an opponent lose 1 and we gain 1. Which is fantastic, especially when we have, 0 mana Ornithopters. That's super useful, especially in the late game. But we're really just using this to kill a creature. I mean, that's what Universal Solvent was trying to do. 7 mana, though, to destroy a permanent. That's a lot. In this case, we have a 2 mana enchantment that we can throw out. We can let it sit there. We can, we can drain our opponent with it. And then when something bad does come into play, then we can sack it and kill something. And that's fine. So that's the idea here. If our opponent has something that we really, really need to kill, we can kill it instantly. But if we get it on turn 2 when we just, we don't have much going on, we can throw this in play, let it sit there and just, drain our opponent for a few turns until something threatening comes into play. So that's pretty much the deck. But I do want to point out also that if you do want to upgrade this deck and spend a little bit more money, you could go with Herald of Anguish and Vraska's Contempt. Herald of Anguish is the absolute best creature with Improvise. It's a 7 mana 5/5 and it's never going to cost 7 mana. So it's a 5/5 with flying, which is fantastic. We get our Tezzeret's Touch just built in with this. And it's, we're never going to pay 7 mana for it. We're going to pay maybe 5 for it, maybe 4 for it, It's going to be very cheap. It's a big flyer. It's a threat. And also, it makes our opponent discard a card every turn, which is fantastic. It's at the end step as well. So the turn we play it, our opponent's going to have to discard something. But then we have the other cool effect, which is you can sacrifice an artifact to give a creature -2/-2. That's really good with, again, like Ornithopters, when we have an excess of them that we don't need. We can just start ditching Ornithopters to kill stuff. We can also, sacrifice the Scrapheap Scrounger, kill something, and then bring the Scrapheap Scrounger right back. It's a really cool effect, and it's really good in this deck. It has so much synergy with, again, Scrapheap Scrounger, with Improvise, and all of our artifacts. It's just a really, really cool card. It's just a little bit out of the budget, just barely. So, fantastic card. Would definitely recommend this. You can replace Barricade Breakers with these without question. Vraska's Contempt is also really good in this deck. It's just a great removal spell. Kill a creature, exile it completely, kill a Planeswalker, gain a couple life. Really good removal spell. It's also very expensive. So Underhanded Designs is what we're going with. Another side note here, I've been playing this deck online. I'm actually going to be posting some games. Servo Schematic is also has a really cool synergy with this deck. Just because we can play it, we get a servo token, so that's 2 mana we can use for improvised spells. Then we can hit it with a Tezzeret's Touch, and we just have a 5/5 that we can beat with. And if our opponent does kill it, we get the 1/1 token when it leaves the battlefield. Then Tezzeret Touch sends it back to our hand, and we can replay it, get the Servo Schematic again, and get another token. So this is a great way to just flood the board with a bunch of small artifacts for improvise. It's kind of a cool thing. I couldn't quite find room for it, but it's something that you can try yourself if you want to. Also note, finally, if you want to upgrade the mana, Fetid Pools and Drowned Catacomb is the way to go. You can replace the dual lands that come with the deck with Fetid Pools. They do the exact same thing. They come into play tapped. But the Fetid Pools have the added benefit of being able to be cycled. So if you top deck this late game, instead of being all angry like, I drew a land, of course I did. Well, now you can pitch it and draw another card, which is kind of fantastic. Drowned Catacomb is also great. It's just a dual land that usually comes into play on tapped. Also, these are very expensive, so very expensive upgrades, but something that you can do if you pull them in boosters or whatever. So that's the deck, guys, and we could still change a lot in this. We could change the essence extractions to something more efficient as a removal spell. Reverse engineers are really, really good. I personally would consider taking out the merchant stock hand for a reverse engineer, just because reverse engineer is, being able to draw that many cards for almost no mana is kind of fantastic. But yeah, that's the deck. It's really fast. We're going to be putting a whole bunch of artifacts in super quick. And then we're going to be getting out these Barricade Breakers and these Bastion Inventors out really fast. Alternatively, we're just going to use Tezzeret's Touch to get a 5/5 flyer on turn 3 and beat with that. There's just a lot of ways to get really big creatures in really quick. And that's generally the idea behind this deck. So if you're liking this deck, guys, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different this time. I'm going to be playing a couple games with a version of this. It's going to be a little bit different just because of Magic Online. Tezzeret Master of Metal is very expensive because it's part of a Planeswalker deck, and I'm basically going to be playing this list that's slightly, altered from this. And I'm going to be giving away this deck on Magic Online. So if you want a chance to win this deck, check out the games video. I will link it in the description. There should also be a link in the end slate. So yeah, check that out. And I hope this was helpful if you have this deck in paper. And if you like this video, I do these Planeswalker upgrade videos from time to time. I've done 2 others in the past. You can check those out. There isn't a playlist yet, but maybe there should be. But either way, if you want to see more of these, let me know. I do plan on trying to get one of these out every once in a while. It does take a little bit of play testing and stuff. But let me know. Let me know what you think of this video. Let me know if you want to see more Planeswalker deck upgrades, and check out the gameplay video. So yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.